Hello, this is Jed Morgan and welcome to WebEx number 6 in this series for the installation and configuration of the IQ PBX platform. So up to now we've basically installed our system, connected, created some basic system settings and created our extension range and indeed created our extensions. So now we're going to cover some routing and we'll begin with outbound routes. So outbound routes are where we seize a trunk via a code and make outbound calls. So outbound routes in basic menu under outbound routes. In the menu section, click on this and this box opens and we can add an outbound route and the configuration box opens up. We can give the route a name. We can insert a dial plan, which I'll show you shortly, and insert any other relevant information we need for the route. And we select the available extensions for this route. These are the extensions that we're going to allow to use this route. And we select the available trunks we're going to allow in this route. So as a demonstration, we'll cancel that and we'll look at our basic one first, our basic setup. So route name in default for this one, as a default route enabled when you plug a system in for the first time in default. There's a route there for you ready to dial out, simply dialing 9. So I've created a rule. I've just adjusted this rule and route a little bit. So 90 dot. So what we do is we insert the dial rule, which is 9 to seize the trunk, and a 0 which is the leading 0, and dot. So anything after the dot will be dialed out to network. It will be checked by the system, and if it's allowed by these extensions on this route, and it will use these trunks to dial it out on. So dial pattern in this route is 90 dot. We strip one digit because we don't want to send the 9 to network. You can prepend the digits. So you can send leading digits, i.e. when you used to have least cost routing, you used to send 1481 for Mercury or etc. You can prepend a series of digits to go to network if you wish. We can password protect the route. So before an extension uses the route, they have to enter the password. Does the route support fax? T38 is support fax over VoIP. Okay, so you only need to set this route if the SIP trunks are being used and if the SIP provider supports T38 fax protocol. Random memory hunt. If you hover over the instruction, the informational icon, it tells you what this menu option means. So it will do a round robin, remembers which trunk was used last time, and then use the next one if you wish to set it to do so. So available extensions, all we do is hover over the extension in the available box. You can either use the shift arrow key here to move it across, so if you highlight it with the shift arrow it will move across, or you can simply double click the extension and it will move across, as so. And again we look further down and we select the available trunks. So at the moment we're going to use our main route out for 90 is going to be Gamma. We can add trunks to it if we wish, and the system will select the trunks in the order they are placed in here. So if for example we have 3 available trunks on Gamma, the 4th person to dial 9 would select the PSTN 2, and the next person to seize a trunk would be able to dial out on a basic rate trunk. So they're selected in order. Okay, so we have the route name, dial pattern, the stripping of digits, prepend the digits, whether we use a password for the route, is it a SIP trunk, does it need fax protocol enabling, and the hunt order of the seizure of the trunk. The available extensions moved over to the selected, and available trunks moved over to the selected for the route. If you wish to remove a trunk from the route, again same thing applies. You can either double click or highlight the trunk and select the move arrow. When you've made your changes, click save, apply the changes, and that's written into the system. So outbound routes are very flexible. This is where we create our routes for extensions not being allowed to dial international, extensions not being allowed to dial 090 numbers. We create our own tables. If you hover over the dial pattern information icon, this shows you how flexible the routes can be. So you can create your own routes, your own rules within your routes. Digits allowed, characters allowed that will stop the end of dialing. So totally flexible. And just an example I created here was local, to dial local numbers, where customers simply want to dial the seizure code, and then any local number would be between 2 and 9. So for example, a 7-digit local number, they would want to dial 9-225-7474. We create a route for this, and we use the letter N in this case, so we're dial 9 dot, and N is any digit between 2 and 9, and the remaining digits in the number of length we want to dial, and followed by the exclamation mark, which is end of dialing, and send. So that's a local route. You can create different routes, and here we can set the available extensions as being all the extensions if we wish. We can allow them all to go into this table. We can select them and which trunks we're going to use for this local route. Okay, so we select the extensions and the trunks, make them available, save the changes, and then it creates our route. So here I've created another route, and this is for a separate SIP trunk. So we'll select our SIP trunk as VoiceFlex for this route, and the extension 500 is the only extension that's going to be able to use this route. So if we don't move the extensions from the available into the selected, they will not be allowed to use this route. So we don't look upon this as a call barring, we look upon this outbound routes as a call allow. Okay, so if we think what we're creating here is what the extensions will be allowed to do, not so much what they can't do. Okay, so dialing 8 on extension 500 will seize this VoiceFlex SIP trunk and make the call. Again, removing the first digit from the outward dial string will just send the number to network. Once you've created your route, save and apply changes, and create your own as you wish. Now these arrows here will move the order of your routes up and down the table. So the system will look for a match at the first one, not found one there, it will look at the second one for a match, and third one for a match, and so on until it finds a match for the route for that call to go out, and it will send it via that route. Okay, so outbound routes. Well, let's move on to inbound routes. So we've created our outbound routes, and we need to create our inbound routes. So you can see here I've created some examples, and if we look at the first example here, we'll look at our main number coming in. This is coming in on Gamma, so the route name I've called it Gamma, the phone number given to us by Gamma. Now this number may not need, depending on the provider, depending on what the requirements are, it may not need the 0. You may insert a 44 in the beginning of here. You could put in 44, leave out the leading 0, depending on requirements. So make the changes and test as necessary if you don't find it working straight away. So this is a DDI number. Again, if you hover over the instructional informational icon, we'll identify what this option means. So little read of that when you're creating your inbound route. If it's a DDI number, we can point it to an extension directly here. So we could insert an extension number here. The DDI number will call the extension directly. If we want the incoming call on our main number to go to anywhere else, to a group or an IVR, then we leave the extension box blank and we move down to this section here, business days. So office hours, we tend to leave that in default, we don't usually change that. Office hours destination, so here we have separate destinations that we can send our main number to during the day, during business hours. We would select, for example, an IVR, which is an auto attendant. If we had multiple auto attendants programmed, we would have the selections here. So for this one, we have just used the welcome. This is business hours and non-business hours. We can set this to, for example, go to voicemail of reception extension, if you like. So that could be reception extension or a destination in non-office hours. Okay, so we have flexibility of where we go in non-office hours. I'll discuss business hours shortly with you and show you how to set those up. So during holidays we can actually program the business hours, as I'll show you shortly, with holidays. And also if it's a fax number, we can set the call to fax. We can set the call to faxes, send it to a virtual extension. We could create a virtual extension, and this will enable the calls to come in via that number and be recognized as a fax for fax to email. Okay, so inbound routes created: route name, DDI number. Is it to go to an extension? The extension number goes in this box. Caller ID number defines the caller ID number to be matched on incoming calls. So, but you can leave this blank unless there's any special need to set this box up. You can leave this blank. Distinctive ringtone. We can map certain ringtones to incoming DDIs. So, for example, you could create one for a family group or a sales group or any other group, and have a distinctive ringtone for that DDI number. Okay, is where we enable callback. So callback settings is when the system will recognize the incoming DDI and you hang up and the system will call you back. That's if you enable callback on this trunk, the system will call you back. Click on callback settings. It takes us to the callback settings within the menu, and you add your callback number that you wish to be called back on. Once you dial in on that DDI, the system recognizes you want callback and you enter the callback number here. Okay, so callback, that's inbound routes. So outbound, inbound routes. And again, we don't really need to move the order up and down the table, but you can if you wish. There's no real need for us to do it in the UK. So outbound and inbound routes, and let's look at the times of day, business hours for times of day that we can set this process to take place. So business hours, it's in the internal options. We look at business hours, and here we enable business hours or we disable business hours. If we disable business hours, then the system simply works in day mode all of the time. But if you enable business hours, then we must create our business hours table and rules. You can also manually instigate business hours and non-business hours. So here this *081, if you dial *081, it will enable day mode, and if you dial *81, it will enable out of business hours or night mode, if you like. So in order to do that, there is an example of one set up here. We can click on Add Office Hours, and the configuration box opens up. So one we created earlier, we'll just look at, we'll go through. So the first thing is we give the route, we give the route a name, we give the rule a name. Those would be standard day, and anything that is not in these white boxes, any time factors that are not in these white boxes are classed as non-business hours. So in these white boxes we must have all our working times of the day. So for example, here we can see that we've set on Monday 8:30 till 12 is business hours, 1400 to 1800 is business hours, and 1900 to 2200 hours are all business. Anything outside of those are classed as non-business hours destinations. So create your table for your working week, save the data, and apply changes. You can add holidays, add a holiday. So you could say Christmas 5 years. So we could call this Christmas 5 years. Christmas 5 years. Details, just put our business holidays over the next 5 years, and dates would be from, an example, if you're very lucky, would be from say 21st of December December 2013 to, let's say, 5th of January 2014. We add that. Oh, sorry, we label it, beg your pardon, give it a label. This would be Christmas 2013, add, and then we could do Christmas 2014, create one for the next 5 years, 2015, add, and you see you get the picture where we can create our holidays for Christmas set over the next 5 years. When you've created your details, press save and apply your changes, and that's set. There's your holidays. You can set bank holidays. So very flexible business hour settings to work with the inbound outbound routes. Okay, I'm going to end this WebEx there, just dealing with inbound outbound routes, and then the next WebEx we'll move on to voicemail, IVRs, and a little bit more information on the system. Okay, many thanks for listening. I'll speak to you on the next one.